All right, so good morning, guys. The next three lectures, we're going to be covering the phytochemical section of the course. This is one of my favorite areas. My undergraduate was biochemistry, but I did kind of a minor in chemistry. And to me, I find the phytochemistry really quite fascinating because that's where all the magic of herbs lives, is in the chemicals. And if you understand the phytochemicals, it'll give you a much greater understanding of how herbs work, their mechanisms of action, and I think it just makes you a better doctor. Now, appreciate, herbalists for thousands of years, or even tens of thousands of years, have used herbs without having any understanding of the phytochemicals. So I wouldn't say that it's a requirement to know the phytochemistry, but if you wanted to pass my course, it is. So I'm not going into great detail of this. I'm just sort of doing a superficial overview of them, because when you're reading about a herb, it'll talk about it contains triterpenoids or contains polyphenolic compounds. And when you hear those terms, hopefully after we finish this section, you'll go, oh, polyphenolic, it's probably got some anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer, antioxidant effects. And that would be great if you're reading about a herb and it talks about some of the chemical constituents. When they mention the things that are in it, you'll understand now why it's used for certain conditions. And so when you learn about herbs, ultimately you want to know what conditions to use them for. And the conditions that you use them for is based on the actions. So an anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, diuretic. And those actions are based on the phytochemicals, because those phytochemicals exert some influence on the body that results in lowering blood pressure or decreasing inflammation. And so the pharmacology is based on the phytochemicals interacting with some little receptor in the body. Okay? So appreciate that herbs, it's not magical. Like sometimes you hear about people saying, oh, herbs have an energetic effect in the body. And I think some practitioners believe that this energy is somehow separate from the phytochemistry. But that is yet to be proven. And, even when you're talking about something as profound and magical as something like ayahuasca, there's definitely an energetic effect with it, but it's based on chemicals interacting with receptors in the body, causing, changes in brainwave activity and everything else. Like when you're learning about Chinese medicine, you're talking about clearing heat. It has an antibiotic effect, and those phytochemicals in the herbs help to clear heat. So you can use that language to explain how it works in that operating system, but ultimately Chinese medicine, which is an energetic type of medicine, just like Ayurvedic medicine is, but they would never just give you some little vial of energy and expect that it's going to work the same as consuming 30 grams of a herbal decoction or a herbal mixture on a daily basis. Okay. Whoa, what's going on here? I have no idea how that little slide got in there. So the goal today is to understand how phytochemicals are classified. And they can be classified by different types of ways, and we'll discuss that in a second. And then we're going to connect some of the actions that we discussed to these classes of phytochemicals. So when you hear about, like I said, essential oils, you kind of know that they're going to affect digestion, and they they dilate capillaries and do a few other things. They have some antimicrobial effects. Okay, and then we're going to use some major herbs as examples of how sources of these phytochemicals. And most of the herbs I'm going to talk about are ones that you may have heard of already. Some of them are going to be like fruits and vegetables, and some of them will be I tried to choose ones that you're going to see again in the second half of the term. So they're not going to hopefully be too obscure. Okay. So what phytochemicals are is basically they're compounds that you find in plants. So plant constituents you could use. So if I say phytochemical, plant constituents, plant compounds, it's all the same term, okay? And these are basically produced by plants. They can be fruits and vegetables, contain a whole bunch of phytochemicals. So when you eat something like some fruit or salad or whatever it is, you'll have vitamins in it, you'll have minerals in it, you'll have macronutrients like fats and proteins and carbohydrates. And then there's also a number of classes of compounds called non-essential nutrients. These non-essential nutrients are the phytochemicals that, technically speaking, you don't need them to survive, so you won't get a disease of deficiency. Like if you don't have vitamin C, you get scurvy. If you don't have a bioflavonoid or a phenolic compound, if you don't eat curry, you're not going to die. But eating turmeric or drinking tea or coffee has these non-essential nutrients that help to prevent overall death, okay? And so your diet is a source of really important phytochemicals. And then in addition to that, in addition to eating a salad, you could end up drinking like herbal teas, or you might take some tincture or pill of a very specific herb that wouldn't be something that you'd normally have in your diet. So the whole gambit, it kind of goes from one end of the spectrum where you're eating a food to the other end of the spectrum where it's a drug. And then some plants fall somewhere in between that. So chamomile tea is both kind of a herbal drug, but it's also a food. You know, oranges for the most part is pretty much only a food. And then something like golden seal would be more on the drug end of the spectrum where it doesn't taste very good. I don't think it's advisable to take it on a daily basis. You take it for a short term to have a desired effect. Okay. As I mentioned before, the phytochemicals have actions associated with it. Sometimes an entire class of phytochemicals will have the same, like if I just say essential oils or aromatic oils, they're all going to have some kind of antimicrobial effect, every single one of them. So if a herb has essential oils, I'm pretty much thinking to myself, there's going to be some antimicrobial effects. While there's some compounds that there are very, very unique actions associated with one particular one that's totally different than another one in that category. So if I'm talking about, let's say, diterpenoids, there could be very, very unique classes with no major overlapping actions that I could generalize about that particular class, okay? The final thing that's worth mentioning is that different phytochemicals have different solubility properties. And what that means is some compounds are more polar, and polar means that it dissolves in water. So something like carbohydrates is very polar because they contain a lot of oxygens, okay? So oxygens and nitrogens attached to a compound will make it more water soluble. Things that are strictly hydrocarbons, meaning they're only consisting of carbons and H's, hydrogens, those things are going to be more soluble in oils in general, oil or fat, okay? And so depending on the compound that you have, some of them will be extractable using tea or water, like a hot water extract. So you make a cup of chamomile tea, you're going to get various flavonoids dissolved in the tea. Some of the essential oils will go to the surface, and it's an effective way to extract those compounds. Other things will not. If you put it in water, it really doesn't dissolve very well. It doesn't really go into the solution very well. So there's other ways to extract that. Some compounds are somewhere between somewhere between being polar and non-polar. So when you're looking at things like turmeric, the yellow color in turmeric is curcumin. It's both kind of water soluble, kind of fat soluble, but it would dissolve better in alcohol than either of those two. We'll talk about that more after the midterm, okay? But when we're going through it, I'll make note of like, yeah, these are water soluble, these are not water soluble, these are better dissolved in alcohol, and you'll understand once we get through that, okay? Question, is anyone hearing a distinct tapping out there? It may just be on Amanda's end, but you guys should all be muted. I don't know if you can check and make sure that your little microphones aren't on for. And sometimes if you happen to have it open, So who's causing the tapping? Let me see if I can general. I don't know if there's a way for me to. The other thing is if you happen to have, it's not on my end, or it shouldn't be. I don't know if there's anything I can do here. Static feedback. Give me 1 second. I'm going to turn my mute. I'm going to mute mine. Let me know if it actually stops on my end, okay? Sorry, when I turn off my microphone, could you guys still hear it? So is it on my end then? Okay, give me a second. Okay, how about that? Is that any better? I'm gonna turn this down. Turn it down here. Turn it down here. Okay, 1, 2, 3, test. Is that better at all if I'm turning it down here? Not at all. No, it's a weird because it's only when you talk. Well, maybe my voice has a clicking with it. Okay, give me a second. I'm gonna go to system preferences. I haven't changed anything from last week, so I don't know why it's doing this. Sound. Okay, I'm gonna try to turn this down. Now, is it still doing it now or not? Because if it is, I can. Classroom 4 says it's totally fine for you to keep going. Oh. Okay, is that better? Much better? No, it's gone? Okay, so we're all good. So maybe I just had my input was messed up. Okay, so we're good. Not gone, but I don't hear it anymore. Laura, you still hear it? Input volume, I'm going to put it there. Mute that. There, how about that? Is it good now? I don't know if that's about as good as I can get. If I can always do my internal mic, which just doesn't sound as good. Okay, sorry about that. Let me know if it lags, if the internet starts slowing down. Let me know if you if it's an issue. Okay. So when it comes to classifying phytochemicals, there are different ways that they can be classified, and this can confuse people because a constituent could belong to multiple different ways of classification, okay? So you could classify a phytochemical based on how it's made. So the terpenoid class, there are monoterpenoids, sesquiterpenoids, diterpenoids, triterpenoids, tetraterpenoids. It's based on the kind of the way that this is made, okay? And although maybe the monoterpenoids have overlapping action, there would be no overlapping actions between the different types of classes of terpenoids, okay? Then you could also have another way of doing it based on a chemical structure. So some things will have a nitrogen, and those are called alkaloids, or they have a phenolic group, which is a type of phenol ring with an OH group attached to it. And so those guys can be classified based on what the structure looks like. So a phenolic could also be a terpenoid, though. So it gets kind of confusing that way, where it could belong to both those categories. It could also be based on whether or not some kind of property it has, like for example, with essential oils or volatile oils, you can obtain them with steam distillation. And what that means is you apply steam to it, it evaporates these oils, tiny, tiny oils that you then can separate from the water and steam later on and get this nice smelling aromatic oil. Those are called volatile or aromatic oils. And so tea tree oil, eucalyptus oil, oregano oil belong to that category. And that's based on just whether or not you can get those essential oils out of it. But they could belong to several different other categories as well, okay? And then finally, certain things have a medicinal action associated with it. So the term tannins, sometimes phytochemicals are classified as being tannins, but they actually, something being a tannin is based on the fact that it has an astringent effect that can be used to basically literally tan the hides of the animals to make leather. And so that's kind of a weird classification that is more based on the effects that those phytochemicals have rather than the actual structure. But the structure is all the same, they're a type of polyphenol compounds, okay? So some things will fall into multiple categories. So to give you an example, you've got the terpenoids in green, and then, hold on. Okay, I'm gonna, apparently, let me do this. If I turn my camera off, can you guys still hear it? Because if it's just an issue with my internet connection somehow doing that, I need to know that. Yes, it's still there. And if I change from to my built-in microphone, can you guys still hear it there? That's the other thing. So I bought like a $200 microphone for this, and it's been nothing but trouble since I bought it. So do I need to speak louder, or is that good enough now? Much better, built-in mic. Yes, much better, less static. Good, that's perfect. Okay, great. So $200 microphone is useless. I've been using it for 2 years. So when we look at this picture here, in the green we've got the terpenoids. Okay. On the right-hand side we've got the purple. These are phenolic compounds. And then we have essential oils kind of in the middle that represents how it overlaps, where it's both terpenoids, some terpenoids, but not all of them. Only the monoterpenoids, sesquiterpenes, sometimes the diterpenoids are considered essential oils. And then some of the phenolics, but not all of them, are essential oils. And then right in the middle here, you could have a particular phytochemical that is a terpenoid, a phenolic compound, and an essential oil. And so one classic example of that is oregano oil. Okay, oregano oil could be classified as in 3 different categories. Okay, so sometimes students have issues kind of wrapping their head around that. To give you an idea, if we're trying to classify animals, you could have a feline, which is a cat, and then you could have another way to classify animals would be domestic animals, which includes lizards and cats and dogs, And you could include mammals would be another way to classify, which would not include the reptiles, but would include the cats and dogs. So a tabby cat would be, or a Siamese cat, or whatever kind of cat you want to talk about, would be both a domestic cat, a domestic animal, a feline, which is one way to classify them using taxonomy, and then the third thing would be a mammal. Okay, so they're all three of those things, and that's kind of like, let's say the green represents felines or mammals. The this little thing represents domesticated, and then the purple would represent, I guess, well, you know what I'm saying, anyways. So carbohydrates. So we're going to start off with carbohydrates. So usually when we think of carbohydrates, we're thinking of one of the macronutrients, protein, fats, and carbohydrates. That's not what I'm talking about here. Now, carbohydrates are a way that plants use sunlight to store energy. So something like sugar is basically like a little battery, very unstable little molecule that can release energy. And when you have complex carbs, your body uses it to, I would say white sugar is kind of like gasoline, and complex carbohydrates are more like burning wood, nice, slow, controlled burning. So you'll learn about those more in nutrition. The common thing with all carbohydrates is that they're made primarily of carbons, oxygens, and oxygen. Okay? And because the ratio of carbons to oxygen is almost like a 1-to-1 ratio, there's a lot of oxygens on a carbohydrate, on a sugar molecule. So what that means is it's very water soluble. If you've ever taken a spoonful of sugar and put it in oil, it just won't dissolve because it's not designed to dissolve in oil. It'll dissolve in water. And so that's an important property that carbohydrates have that makes it useful as a phytochemical in some other ways. Okay, so there are different types of categories of carbohydrates that we'll talk about. There are glycosides, where you have some kind of phytochemical with a sugar attached to it. And then there's fiber, mucilage, and gels, which are all kind of in the same category, overlapping. We'll come to that in a second. So when it comes to what are the main actions of carbohydrates, one, because they store energy, they can act as basically as a fuel source or a food for animals, but also for bacteria. So we may not digest certain types of fibers, but your gut bacteria do, and then that's called a prebiotic. So probiotics are bugs that live in your gut. Prebiotic is a food that can feed those bugs. What's interesting if you're eating a plant-rich diet, you're going to be getting lots of food for various microorganisms in your gut. If you went and just only ate McDonald's for a week straight, certain bugs will actually become extinct in your gut, and you'll just lose them entirely because you're no longer able to feed them. So taking a probiotic supplement is good, but the best thing you can do is eat foods rich in fiber, but also in certain phenolic compounds can act as a food source for them as well. So that's one thing, energy source for us and for our bugs. There's also some other actions associated with the fiber content, and that's a demulcent, where it has a soothing effect on your mucous membranes. We're going to come back to that in a second. Or bulk laxatives, which helps you go to the washroom. Fiber is also beneficial for both weight loss and diabetes because it can help balance blood sugar. It may help to control cholesterol. And then some specific classes of carbohydrates can also have an immunostimulating effect. Okay? So not all carbohydrates do this. For example, glucose does not have a hypoglycemic effect. In fact, it has a hyperglycemic effect. Sugar will raise cholesterol. It may suppress your immune system. It only acts as an energy. While fiber would not act as a food source for you, but it would for your gut, and may have all these other actions depending on the type of fiber. Okay. So we're going to start with glycosides. What a glycoside is, it's some type of organic compound where a sugar has been attached to it. And the reason why plants do this is when you add a sugar to a molecule, it makes it more water soluble. And so the benefit of that is a couple things. One, if you're trying to transport some kind of compound throughout the plant, if it's not water soluble, it's hard for it to move around. So by adding a sugar to it, it then is able to move around through water in the body, or in the plant, or in the organism, whatever it may be. The other thing that you do is when you add a sugar molecule to certain compounds, it can temporarily or reversibly inactivate that compound. So when you look at the compound on the left, that's salicin. That's basically a glycoside of salicylic acid. If you remember, aspirin is similar to salicylic acid. It's called acetylsalicylic acid. So salicin is kind of one of the main forms that the quote-unquote aspirin exists in the willow bark, but also other plants as well. And that makes it more water soluble. So when that sugar molecule is attached to it, it's unlikely that it's going to interact with the enzymes in the body. Maybe it does, but I don't think it would interact with the enzymes to exert its anti-inflammatory effect. But when that sugar molecule gets removed, it will liberate that compound, and then it can then become biologically active. So you can use it to basically inactivate a compound. You can use it to make it more water soluble, so it can be transported or excreted. The other thing you can do is you can add a sugar molecule to store it. So if you have a compound that's somewhat fat soluble, it could diffuse through some cell membranes. And so the problem with that is you can't control where it goes. If you add a sugar to it, it then will remain in the aqueous layer. And so you could have that inside a cell membrane, and it won't be able to go across a cell membrane or a vacuole or some other area that gets stored in the cell, okay? So those are the three main things: storage, transportation, and also excretion. Now, what's interesting about glycosides is plants make them, but so do humans. So one of the ways that we control estrogen levels and other steroid levels in our body is we'll add sugars onto it. So for example, glucuronic acid is a type of sugar that gets attached to estrogen to make it more water soluble, because as you probably know, estrogen can diffuse through cell membranes. If you apply estrogen to your skin, it will be diffused through and go into your bloodstream. And so if your body has too much estrogen, what the liver will do, or not too much, one of the ways to control the levels is it basically gets processed by the liver, and it attaches to glucuronic acid to it so that it can be excreted in the urine or in the feces. And if you didn't have that sugar attached, it would just keep circulating around and get back in the bloodstream, okay? So both plants and animals use glycosides for various purposes, okay? Or create them. Now, if you hear the term glycoside, that alone does not mean anything to me, okay? There are different types of glycosides. There's hydroquinone glycosides, cardiac glycosides, saponins, anthraquinone glycosides. The subclasses mean something to me because I understand what hydroquinones do. Cardiac glycosides is a very specific group of them that I know about. So the big umbrella term of glycosides means nothing from a functional herbal action standpoint. It's only when you get into the subcategories that I might be able to, or normally I could extrapolate what it could be used for, okay? So one of the things with glycoside is if you have the glycoside in the body, it can be hydrolyzed. And hydrolysis is the process where basically you can cleave a bond using a water molecule in the presence of either acid, base, or heat, okay, to destabilize that bond. So when you take a glycoside and you hydrolyze it, you basically produce two compounds. One's called the aglycone and one's called the glycone. So the aglycone is probably going to be the functional group, that other organic compound that the sugar has been attached to. That's really the star of the show here. You know, the sugar is just like the backup singers. You know, you don't really need them. It's, you know, the aglycones. That's like the front man for the band, and he's the most, or they, she, her, whatever is the most important molecule there. Okay, so the aglycone, A means not, glycone meaning sugar. Okay, and so that's what we want to use, or that's what we want to focus on. So that aglycone is going to be the compound that exerts the influence in the body, okay? So if on an exam, I could say, uh, which of the following, so I could make it sound tricky, but it really isn't. Which of the following is okay, this molecule here that I'm showing is a glycoside of, I believe it's quercetin, a bioflavonoid. So on the left, I think that's rutin. And when you remove the sugars from rutin, you get the A-glycone quercetin. And so there are thousands of flavonoid glycosides that exist, but you can basically add a sugar to any one of these OH groups here. So if I added a little glucose molecule over here, it's a totally new glycoside. If I add 2 sugars over here, that's another glycoside. If I add 1 sugar here, that's another glycoside. And so there could be thousands of glycosides that exist in nature, but there may only be, let's say, a handful of aglycones, flavonoids that actually, when you hydrolyze them all, that they break down to. So quercetin could have millions, unlimited number of glycosides in theory. Okay. So an exam question I could ask, I could say like the aglycone component of the cardiac glycosides is A, a triterpenoid, B, a anthraquinone, C, a 2 glucose molecules, or D, a monoterpenoid. Oh no, that wouldn't be the good question. That would totally throw you off. Well, no, you could do that one. But if I said, sorry, the glycone component of the glycoside is A, sugar, B, something else, then you just would be able to look at it and go, well, I know the glycone sugar, so whether it's a maltose or a fructose or a glucose molecule, you could deduce that one, okay? If I asked you what is the A-glycone component of a anthraquinone glycoside, then I would expect you to know that anthraquinone is the A-glycone component of an anthraquinone glycoside. Okay, does that make sense? So there is the anthraquinone glycoside, and these are the GLCR. That's a sugar molecule there. Here's a coumarin glycoside. So here's the sugar there, and here's the coumarin. Here's a flavonoid glycoside, a couple sugars stuck down here. Okay, a phenol glycoside. So here's the sugar over here. So these are different ways that sugars can be drawn, just as a GLC, or this 6-membered little ring here, or these little boat versions of it, or these little Kermit Frog-looking little creatures here. Those are all sugars, just different ways that chemists can draw. Okay. Is everybody still out there? Am I clicking? Are we all good? Yep. Thank you, Adam. So, moving forward, the next group we're going to talk about are mucilage, gums, and gels. And these all fall under the category of kind of, I would say, fiber, okay? For most, fiber is basically undigestible carbohydrates. And in our bodies, fiber, we can't break down fiber. Your gut bacteria can, but we can't. And fiber can have these various properties depending on the source of it, okay? So mucilage and gum are basically rich in carbohydrates. There could be other things in there, but it's primarily carbohydrates. They're very water soluble. So when you so there's soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. The mucilage and the gums are going to be soluble fibers. And when you add them to water, what it does is it makes slime, okay? So human beings make mucus to protect our mucous membranes. So mucus is it's mostly carbohydrates with some amino acids. So it's kind of like a protein-ish, very little bit of protein, but mostly different types of carbohydrates. And it makes slimy, mucusy kind of consistency. Plants make mucilage. So it's like plant-based mucus. Gums can also have this mucilaginous property. So when you take either mucilage or gums, grind it in powdered form and add to water, it'll form like a slimy, viscous, meaning thick substance, okay? Gels can also come from mucilage and gums. What a gel is, it's something that forms more of a semi-solid sort of consistency when water is added to it, okay? So obviously Jello is like a gel, but you can also get apple pectin will gel up, and that's why people use it to make jam, because it gives it that solid consistency. and other things can do that as well. So in general, mucilage gums and gels can have the following actions. Because they change the viscosity of the liquid, most of the properties I'm going to talk about are related to that actual physical effect it has making liquid semi-solid or solid, okay? So a demulcent effect, what that is that's an action where people use that in herbal medicine, or herbalists use that to protect the mucous membranes. And so one of the ways that you can do that is by drinking slimy water. It coats your esophagus and your stomach to help protect against some kind of chemical assault, whether that's stomach acid or whether that's soothing a sore throat because you've got viruses are irritating and the tissues are becoming a little bit more sensitive. So demulcents, basically, it's kind of like a slimy armor for your mucous membranes. You can have ones that either coat the esophagus, and there's another type of demulcent that is unrelated to the carbohydrate component, where it can actually stimulate mucus production. So either you're supplementing with mucilage, meaning plant mucus, or you stimulate the body's ability to make mucus, and that's what's found more in certain herbs like DGL, or licorice and DGL. Okay, so we're not talking about those ones right now. So just slimy water is one way to act as a demulcent. Another way that mucilage gums and gels can act medicinally is as a bulk laxative. So you ever buy those little toys when you're a kid, those animals that you add into water and they grow, so they're like little green and red, let's say reptiles or crocodiles. You throw them in a cup of water and the next morning they've increased by 1,000-fold or maybe 100-fold or 10-fold. So suddenly it's like 10 inches long instead of being an inch long. So the way that those toys are working is that they basically contain some kind of fiber that, when added to water, it absorbs the water and expands. Okay, and so when you eat soluble fiber, it absorbs water and then expands inside you. And so now you have greater bulk inside your intestinal tract. And so one of the ways that your bowels work is there are stretch receptors that, when you basically expand something in the lumen of the bowel, it stimulates peristalsis and gets things moving. So bulk laxatives is related to just various fiber sources in general. And there are certain herbs that, like marshmallow, shown on the left there, you can take the root or the leaf in powder form or do another type of extract, drink the slimy water, and you are getting a little bit of a bulking action from it. Not that great, but there are better bulking agents to choose from now. Cyprium is superior, and so is something like psyllium. We'll talk about that later. Maybe I have to probably have a photo come out. Another action that carbohydrates can have, less related to health, more related to the food industry, is an emulsifying agent. So sometimes we'll add mucilage in gums and gels, like mastic gum or other types of fibers, to foods in order to thicken them up. So if you're eating like maybe some kind of soup or a milkshake and it's kind of thick, they can use carbohydrates like this to thicken it up. And then finally, from a hypoglycemic or from a diabetes and weight loss standpoint, one of the ways that fiber works in that department is soluble fiber turns into kind of like a gel-like state in your bowels. So now appreciate you now have sugar molecules that are trying to swim through jello instead of through water. And so naturally that's going to slow down the movement of the sugar through the intestinal tract. And as a result, you're going to get less of a spike in your blood sugar. It's not unlike having a shot of alcohol on a full stomach or having it on an empty stomach. And you have a little bit of alcohol on an empty stomach, it goes right to your head because it gets absorbed quickly and then you kind of crash. You have it on a full stomach, it's less likely to have the same impact on you because it gets diluted by the intestinal contents. And so one of the ways that fiber works on sugar is you get less of a spike in your blood sugar, and that means that less insulin gets released, which tells your body to make fat, and you're less likely to get a crashing of your blood sugar, resulting in fatigue and irritability and stimulating your stress response. Okay. So you don't have to take this in a herb form. You can totally get this from your diet just by eating. Every morning I have like fruit, nuts, and seeds for breakfast, which is rich in fiber from flax and chia, for example. And so I'm getting a bulk laxative, a hypoglycemic, and even a little bit of a demulcent action just every day for my breakfast. Or you might prescribe or recommend a patient take powdered marshmallow and add that to water and sip it for heartburn to help protect the mucous membrane. And that would be another thing. Or you might recommend someone take a fiber supplement like Metamucil, which is basically comes from psyllium and it's a bulking agent. Okay. So the difference between mucilage and gums, I'll kind of explain what that is. Mucilage is produced under normal conditions. So when you pick the plant, it's already produced mucilage. It's always in there, and it's just a normal part of that plant. And you can get mucilage in seeds, flax seeds, chia, psyllium, all are rich in mucilage, or you can get it in the root or the leaf of things. So marshmallow root and leaf can both be indicated. Aloe vera gel is a type of mucilage that forms a gel. Slippery elm is another herb where the inner bark is rich in fiber that can be used in a powder form and added to water. So again, mucilage is always found in the plant. Psyllium husk, this is what Metamucil, which is used for constipation. You can also use it for diarrhea. I'll talk about that later on. And then flaxseed, this is what the flower looks like, kind of pretty little flower I took a picture of. But the seeds are what's used in medicine, and it has all sorts of great properties to it. You should eat that every day as far as I'm concerned. Now, gums, which can share similar properties to some of the other mucilages that we talked about, they produce these gums in response to trauma to the plant. So during periods of drought, or if a tree or a plant is attacked in some way or damaged, it may produce the various gums in response to trauma, okay? So it doesn't really make a big difference when we're talking about gums from a herbal standpoint, from a medicinal standpoint. It's more of just from a chemical standpoint, like how it's produced, okay? So when I was down in Mexico, I went to a little place where they used to harvest chiclet. So chiclet is the tree that used to be used to make chiclets, the gum. So chiclets, they probably aren't, I don't know what they're using anymore. I doubt they're using it. They could be. So, but the way that you obtain it is you basically put incisions, you can see on the right-hand side, you put big incisions in the tree trunk, and this kind of sap-like substance comes out that's rich in carbohydrates that then can be scraped off and dried and then packed to make gum, like peppermint chewing gum, okay? So in addition to the chiclet gum, there's mastic gum, guar gum, xanthan gum, and arabic gum are commonly used in, I would say, the food industry. Now, just as an aside, have you ever seen people making really, really big bubbles, like for entertainment purposes? You know, you make 2-foot bubbles and stuff. The recipes in those usually contain like Dawn soap, which is really good for making bubbles for some reason. They might put a little glycerol in it, and often they'll put some mastic guar gum in it because it helps to make the bubble solution a little bit more viscous, which I think helps to keep the surface tension better sustained, so you can get bigger bubbles out of it. So there's recipes you can find online, and they usually call for mastic gum or guar gum. Okay. Any questions on that? Oh, good. So, beta-glucans, this is an important group of compounds medicinally. They are carbohydrates. They are a type of fiber. These polysaccharides have a linkage that's basically a beta type of linkage, either a beta 1,3,1,4 linkage is what you find in like oatmeal and barley. So if you have beef and barley soup, you may notice that the soup becomes kind of thick and viscous. Or if you have oatmeal, I think everyone here knows that oatmeal is pretty slimy stuff. So it can form like a porridge-like consistency to it. Those beta-glucans are forming a type of mucilage that can help with it's a fiber source, so it can help with bowel movements. It's nice and soothing for the intestinal tract. It can lower cholesterol. It can lower blood sugar levels. But you know, the only problem with the oats is it's rich in carbohydrates, so it kind of it's a pretty heavy glycemic load for diabetics. But anyways, there's another type of, so that's a beta 1314 linkage. Another type of linkage is beta 1316 linkage. And a lot of medicinal mushrooms have these particular carbohydrates. And so what's really neat is certain mushrooms like shiitake mushrooms or Ganoderma or Trametes versicolor, these all have these beta 1316 linkages that are used to stimulate the immune system to help the body fight cancer and various viral infections. Okay. Also, certain seaweeds like carrageenan, which is also used in the food industry, it's a type of glucan. It's an alpha 1,3 beta 1,4 linkage. It does not exert the immunostimulating effects, but it will have the same medicinal properties associated with the fibers and the mucilage, where you have the hypoglycemic effects and cholesterol-lowering effects, but you're not going to have that anti-cancer, immunostimulating, antiviral properties. Okay, so again, I'm sure I've asked a question on this on the exam. I might have a question like, which of the following beta linkage glucans has immunostimulating properties? Is it A, 1314 linkage, B, beta 1316 linkage, or C, alpha 1,3 and beta 1,4 linkages? And you know it's a 1316 beta linkages, okay? So shiitake mushrooms on the left-hand side has been used in Asian cooking, but also often combined for certain types of viral infections, like chronic viral infections or acute ones, as well as cancer therapy. So one of the properties with lowering cholesterol is the more viscous you can make your stomach contents, the greater the effect it's going to have on lowering cholesterol. So really thick, slimy sources of mucilage and fiber will have a much better cholesterol-lowering effect than having ones that are less viscous. And so I don't know what the precise mechanism is, whether it's because it's affecting insulin levels or whether it's helping to pull the cholesterol out of the body by trapping it in that gel matrix kind of. I'm not sure, but a diet rich in fiber certainly has a cholesterol-lowering effect for sure. Now, just as an aside, one of the confusing things when you're looking at research with fiber, research may show that fiber helps lower the risk for colon cancer. Fiber lowers the risk of heart disease. Appreciate sometimes these statements aren't totally accurate because they may be looking at a diet rich in fiber that does that, but a diet rich in fiber is a plant-based diet, and so some of those attributes, like let's say hypoglycemic or bulk laxative effects, may be associated with the fiber, but its ability to prevent colon cancer may be related to other phytochemicals that happen to be along with the fiber. So there's some debate whether fiber helps with colon cancer, for example, and I suspect that supplementing a fiber is not going to have the same beneficial effect. If you're eating like McDonald's all the time and then you take a spoonful of psyllium husk every day, I don't think that's going to have a dramatic effect on lowering your risk of colon cancer compared to a vegan eating no animal products and eating 50 grams of fiber a day in their diet. Okay, just as an aside. Here is one of my favorite little mushrooms is Reishi mushroom. So this is Ganoderma lucidum. This is a cool mushroom. We're not going to talk about it a lot. You'll learn about it more in another year. This is used in Chinese medicine for a long time, sometimes referred to as the mushroom of immortality, which is a pretty awesome name. If I was a mushroom, that's the name I'd want to have. And so it has beta-glucans in it. It also has some other compound called triterpenoids, saponins, steroidal saponins, which we'll talk about later on. So this is used historically as an immunostimulant for cancer, different types of hepatitis, viral infections. It also helps the body to cope with stress, not related to the beta-glucans, I don't think. It's more related to the triterpenoids that we'll talk about later on. And those triterpenoids in reishi mushroom are similar to the ones you'll find in, let's say, ginseng. Just remember that, and we'll come back to it later. So this can lower cholesterol, it can stimulate the immune system, has antiviral effects, has anti-cancer effects. You probably would be difficult to get a bulk laxative effect out of this at the therapeutic dose, just because you're probably only having a few grams of this per day, which isn't going to have a major effect on, maybe it would, but anyways. So that's another source of beta-glucans. And Laura, I see your question. I'll come back to it in a second. Or Caitlin, I'll answer your question in a second. So shiitake, I showed you a picture of reishi. The other one here is turkey tail. This grows in North America in the Northern Hemisphere. In particular, that mushroom contains a certain extract that's been researched. You can type this in the PubMed and you'll get well over 100 research studies that have been conducted on a compound called polysaccharide K, or PSK. And that's carbohydrate is, it's got little proteins attached to beta-glucan. So it's mostly a carbohydrate with some little amino acids stuck onto it. And it's got some good research, I think, for cancer. And I'll appreciate that. It doesn't mean that it's going to cure cancer. I don't treat a lot of cancer right now just because I'm just not focused on it. But I have treated people in the past with cancer quite a bit. And I will often recommend a mushroom extract of some sort that they take along with other things. I probably wouldn't tell them to spend $50 on shiitake, $50 on reishi, and $50 on turkey tail, because they're all containing the same type of phytochemicals, and I don't know which one's better. I think there'd be less of a synergistic effect if you took them all together at the same dose compared to if you maybe took one of these mushrooms with some other anti-cancer treatments like turmeric along with reishi mushroom might be superior than just taking reishi, shiitake, and turkey tail all at once, because you're getting the same thing kind of multiple doses. So I could be wrong, but that's kind of my approach. Is I always try to understand the phytochemicals in hopes that I have different mechanisms, so I'm not getting some redundant or just a cumulative effect when I could be getting a synergistic effect. Okay. So medicinal mushrooms, useful for viral and cancer treatments. Okay. I've got 2 questions here. Sorry, this is a dumb question. Are beta-glucans a subcategory of glycosides? No, that's a good. It's a good question to ask. So I don't want you to be confused. Glycosides are unrelated to glucans and fibers and stuff like that. All that it means when you have a glycoside is you stuck a sugar onto it. The glucans and the mucilage and those, they won't have any phenolic compounds or other organic compounds stuck to them. Okay, they're just almost a pure carbohydrate, or in some cases like the PSK, there's some few little amino acids stuck onto it, making it almost exclusively a carbohydrate. Okay, so when you're looking at something like the phenolic compounds, most of those are not going to have the cholesterol lowering effects. They could due to the phenolic compound, but not due to the fiber content. Okay, so it's the organic compound, not sugar compound, that's going to exert its medicinal effects, while the mucilage and the gums and the glucans, it's the actual carbohydrates that do. Okay, so they're unrelated. So I would say you've got carbohydrates at the top, and then you could have glycosides branching off, and then another branch from the glycosides above where you have fiber, and then you could have the mucilage and gums and mucilage, gums, and gels all kind of grouped in that, okay? Another question, how often would one take Reishi? I know someone who takes it every day, capsules from Costco. Some people take it every day. It might be beneficial for that person to take it every day. It's become popular, good research on it, can have a balancing effect. That would be something I think it would be safe to take every day. Some things I would not recommend taking every day. I think for that should be safe. Sorry, is PSK just found in turkey tail or other medicinal mushrooms? I think PSK is only found in turkey tail, but there'd be very similar compounds in, I think it's only in turkey tail, but it's kind of like the compounds in the other ones. I could be wrong with that. As far as I know, it's only the one. Someone's mother has high blood pressure, takes Reishi daily. Pretty good so far. She likes it. Well, good. I'm not too concerned with Reishi. It has some other benefits. It's a good thing. Let me check my time. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break right now, and we will come back. My clock says 10:37, so why don't we come back at 10:47? And yeah, let's come back in 10 minutes, have a little break, and hopefully you guys will be ready to go then. If you have any questions, just write them down there, okay? Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about are resins, oleoresins, and gum resins. So resins are basically a mixture of hydrocarbons that come from plants. Generally speaking, most of the resins, resins in general are non-polar, meaning that they contain hydrocarbons in it. And so these could be compounds that are essential oils, or various like different types of terpenoids. They may contain some phenolic compounds. And they may exist by themselves, or they could exist associated with other types of things as well, okay? So oleoresins is basically a name that, it's a resin from a plant that is rich in essential oils. And so someone could say something's a resin and not specify that it's an oleoresin, and it could just also contain essential oils. So a resin is kind of the umbrella term, and then oleoresins could be a more specific name for it if you want to really emphasize that it has these essential oils, okay? A gum resin basically means that in addition to the resins, there is a carbohydrate component to it. So you injure the tree, let's say, I would say that Arabic gum and frankincense and myrrh and things like that are resins, but they're probably more accurate a gum resin because they have these carbohydrate components to it. Even the chiclet tree, it's a gum, but it contains some essential oils in it, so it's probably more accurate called a gum resin, okay? And so depending on who's talking about the plant, they may just say, oh, this plant produces a lot of gum, or they could say, oh, this plant produces resins, but it may be they're both only partly rated. It's actually a gum resin, okay? Or more specifically, an oleo gum resin, meaning it's rich in essential oils and gum, and it has a resin component of it, okay? So in general, I would say that most resins have some kind of antimicrobial effect. Presumably when plants, if a plant is going to the effort to make a substance, there has to be some purpose. You don't just randomly waste resources on making chemicals if you don't need to, right? So most of these resins are going to be used to probably fight off insects or infections of some sort, okay? So if you look on the left-hand side, there's a balsam resin. So that's one of the, usually the Christmas trees, or often Christmas trees are made from balsam trees. And balsam resin, you can pop those little bubbles on the side of the tree, and this stuff trickles out, and it's kind of like a thick oil that comes out initially, and it smells like a Christmas tree because it's rich in essential oils, okay? Balsam resin has often been used for taken internally as for various types of respiratory infections. Another thing that a lot of these resins have are anti-inflammatory effects. So I would say they all have antimicrobial effects, and many of them will have an anti-inflammatory effect as well. Not all of them, but I think a lot of them do. So here's some pretty little pictures I took. Normally when you look at myrrh or frankincense, it tends to kind of look like a kind of looks like a piece of rock. It's usually kind of dark and not very translucent. But what I did with these to get these nice pictures is I basically rinsed them quickly with turpentine just as a solvent to take the powder off the outside, and then basically backlit it using a light. So I took a photograph of the light coming through it, and you can see it's quite pretty. It has nice yellowy orange colors to it. So myrrh that's on the left-hand side, that's a gum resin that comes from, or probably an oleo gum resin that comes from Commiphora mucul, which is a tree that grows in North Africa mostly, and kind of a part of the Middle East. And so you've probably heard of myrrh if you've heard about Christianity. Baby Jesus received as a gift frankincense, myrrh, and some gold. And so myrrh is revered in a lot of cultures. It can be burned as an incense. It also has really important antimicrobial effects, so it can be used to treat certain types of infections. The eclectic doctors or eclectic physicians often recommend it for various types of respiratory infections. It's also recommended it can be used. There's research supporting it as an antiparasitic against giardia and certain types of vaginal infections. And cousins of it it's been used to lower cholesterol. On the right-hand side, that's Indian frankincense. It's a different plant. It comes from a different tree than frankincense comes from. It too can be used, can be burned, and in incense. Its primary actions as an anti-inflammatory. They use it for arthritis and various types of inflammatory issues, including colitis, respiratory inflammation. And so again, both have antimicrobial properties, some anti-inflammatory properties, and then amber, which is in the picture. Amber is usually sold as a jewelry. It's a polished amber, and what amber is it's resin from trees that's fossilized, over thousands of years. Okay, and so it too could be used in medicine, but typically it's just used as jewelry. And there you go. So when you have an oleo resin, if you perform steam distillation on it and you apply heat to it, you get those essential oils to evaporate off and you can collect them. And what's remaining behind is called rosin, okay? So the essential oils has small compounds that are volatile. And so when you look at, like, going back to that balsam tree, when you take that sap out of that and you evaporate off, so I'm gonna go back here. You take this, what I've circled in red there, that little drip there is the oleo resin. And when you heat that up, you'll get the essential oils out of it. And that essential oil can be used to make turpentine. So turpentine is basically essential oils obtained from various pine trees and is used as a paint thinner. You don't want to drink a lot of paint thinner. It's not good for you to have a lot. But certainly some of these, a little bit of these compounds can be taken, ingested internally and applied topically, but don't overdo it. Same thing as any essential oil in general. You've got to watch how much you take internally because it's basically a turpentine. Now, if you look at this chalky substance over here, this is where probably what's happened is the oleo resins dribbled out and then the essential oils evaporated over a couple months, leaving behind this chalky white substance. That's the rosin, okay? So the rosin is going to contain larger compounds that don't evaporate off, and to touch it's very sticky. Now, rosin is used in addition to being used in herbal medicine. It's used for by athletes. So if you look at gymnasts, rock climbers, the chalk that they'll put on their hand is often a rosin. So it's like a sticky kind of powder that's put on their hands to make their hands grippier. Or violinists will apply rosin to their violin bow to make it grip better on the strings, okay? Or dancers might put it on their feet or shoes, okay? So that's just for interest's sake what it is. So the rosin is basically, a question on the exam might be, if you evaporate, if you take oleo resin and you apply heat to it and collect the vapor, it would contain A, essential oils, B, rosin, C, gum, something like that. Or if you apply heat to an oleo resin, the substance that the chalky substance that remains on the surface is A, essential oils, B, rosin, etc. Okay. So now we're going to talk about oils in general. We've already kind of mentioned essential oils. Essential oils are short nonpolar hydrocarbons. So hydrocarbons are just made up of only carbons and oxygens, or carbons and hydrogens, no oxygens, generally speaking. These essential oils are typically about 10 to 15 carbon in length. You could get some that are 20 carbon length, but usually they're shorter, like 10 to 15 carbons. And they usually belong to other classified chemicals called monoterpenes or sesquiterpenes, some diterpenoids as well, diterpenes, and also another group that we'll talk about later called phenylpropenes. So phenylpropenes are made in a different fashion than the monoterpenes and sesquiterpenes. They share a lot of the same, I would say share a lot of the same additional actions, but they just are classified in a different way when they're built, okay? So common essential oils would be peppermint, oregano oil, tea tree, eucalyptus. You can also get cinnamon oil, clove oil, dill oil. Many of the trees in the Apiaceae family are used in your spice stores. So culinary spices like caraway, fennel, cumin, coriander. Also members of the mint family, the Lamiaceae family. So peppermint, rosemary, oregano, basil, lavender, spearmint. They all produce essential oils as well. A couple other important families would be the laurel family. So if you've ever seen any of the trees in the laurel family, cinnamon, camphor, and sassafras, you take the leaves of the plant, you crush them up in your hand and smell them. They have that nice aromatic quality to them. Also other spices like clove and famous eucalyptus from originally from Australia and South Pacific, and tea tree. Those are important herbs that are used as antiseptics as well. So in general, I would say all essential oils have the potential to act as carminatives. And what carminatives do is they help to aid digestion. They help to increase blood flow to the intestinal tract and help to relax smooth muscles and sphincters that could be cramping up. When you apply essential oils topically, what happens? They cause the capillaries to dilate. And when that happens, they act as a rubefacient. So internally, they increase blood flow to the intestinal tract. Topically, they also increase blood flow to the area by causing the capillaries to dilate, but it makes the area red and called a rubefacient. And that's used more for muscle creams and sports creams to decrease pain. I would say all essential oils have some antiseptic quality, antimicrobial effect. They tend to disrupt cell membranes of viruses and bacteria and parasites and irritate them. They kind of make them more susceptible to attack or just weakens them, okay? They're not an antibiotic in the sense that they target a very precise enzyme or transporter that's essential to the microorganism's survival. Rather, it just kind of goes and just compromises the membrane or wall of them to make them a little leakier. It's like they don't poison them; they just kind of go and stab them, so to speak. I think that's, or shoot them. Okay, so they may or may not die from that. Now, in general, I want you to appreciate that essential oils are useful. You can take them internally, but they can be very dangerous. Some of them are more dangerous than other forms. Some essential oils, if you take less than a teaspoon, might be enough to kill someone. And so appreciate if you had a child and they grabbed a bottle of clove oil or wintergreen oil, little bottles of essential oils might contain 5 or 10 mils of essential oil. That would be enough if a child got their hands on it and swallowed it to cause death. It probably rarely happens because once you put it in your mouth, you're likely to spit it up because it's not going to feel very good. But you kind of have to keep your eyes on that. And kids get into stuff, so watch out. Peppermint oil is a little bit more benign. I think you'd have to. I don't even know if I think you'd feel awful, but I don't think it would kill you per se. Okay. Someone's asking a good question that I don't know the answer to. I think I may have once. Caitlin asked, what makes essential oils, quote unquote, essential? I think maybe that, I don't know, aromatic oils is easy to explain because the little oils in it evaporate. Essential, I think, is probably that someone believes that this is like the essence of the plant is in the essential oils. I suspect that's where it came from, but we're gonna have to Google that one to find out the meaning of it. I probably remember. I probably learned it at some point. Now forgotten, but someone's asking. Some oils are more viscous. I can't read the bit. Something example. Vetiver is very thick when you go to diffuse it, and peppermint is not. Are those thicker oils more related to resins? I would say if an essential oil is thicker, it could be that peppermint oil might only have menthol, which is 10 carbons. If you get into a thicker essential oil, it's probably going to have more sesquiterpenes and even diterpenoids in it. So, for example, cannabis has THC. THC is a diterpenoid. It will evaporate. I think it's kind of considered an essential oil because if you have marijuana in your cupboard and you leave it for a year and come back to it, it's lost its potency. So assuming that compound's evaporated off to some degree. And I would say anytime you have larger molecules, they tend to increase the viscosity. So if you look at something like really long fats that are made from really long chains are more likely to be more viscous at room temperature than, well, that's not always true. It depends on saturation of the bond and stuff. So, but yes, the bigger the compound, the more likely it's going to be kind of thicker, okay? I would think. So fixed oils, which I was kind of starting to talk about there, fixed oils are different than essential oils. These are basically fats. They're made up of a triglyceride backbone, so glycerol or triglyceride, and then you have fatty acids attached to it. So fatty acids is these guys. I don't know if I have another picture. Fatty acid. So the glycerol is this compound here. So you've got, normally it's what it is by itself is CH2OH or CH3OH, CH3O or CH2OH, sorry. Basically, leave all these guys off, you've got an OH group here. And it's kind of like a type of alcohol-like substance. But you can take a fatty acid and add it to each one of these oxygens here and then remove them if you wanted to, okay? And so depending on the length of these bonds, whether or not they're saturated, so the first one here is a saturated fatty acid, while the second one is a monosaturated fatty acid, and the third one here is a polyunsaturated fatty acid. The polyunsaturated fatty acids tend to remain liquids at room temperature, while the saturated ones have a tendency to form solids or semi-solids at room temperature. So coconut oil might have more of these saturated bonds, and fish oils and omega-3s and omega-6 oils will be more, probably won't form a solid at room temperature. So any of the cooking oils are different ones. Flax, coconut, castor oil, olive oil, almond oil are all considered to be fixed oils. The difference between a fixed oil and a essential oil is Fixed oils cannot be obtained by steam distillation. The way that you get those is you just squeeze the seed or the nut and the oil just comes out. It may come out with some water, so you may have to separate the aqueous phase from it afterwards, but it's usually obtained through pressure, while essential oils are usually obtained through steam distillation or heating up the extract and collecting the steam or the vapor, okay? So we got some people who answered. Ashton says, I think it's essential to the plant for protection and fertilization purposes, not exactly for the human. Yeah, I agree with that. I Google essential oil. Laura's got a nice explanation. The term dates way back to the days of Middle Ages when the alchemist, known as fifth, you can read that. During these times, anything that was produced, a liquid that didn't mix with water was classified as an oil. Yeah. Thus, when essential oils were discovered, it was considered to be the fifth element and considered to be one of the essential things to all living things. This is where the term essential oil came from and remains intact. So it goes back to way back to the alchemists. So it's not really, it's sort of a more of a mythical sort of term for it as opposed to having any good chemical properties to it. So, but kind of fun. Someone says, what is an expectorant? Fourth bullet of action. Where did I have expectorant? Oh, there it is. Thanks for asking me. An expectorant is a substance that helps you cough up phlegm. So you expectorate phlegm. So an expectorant, so certain herbs are used for colds and they help you cough up phlegm, and they often contain like eucalyptus oil or menthol and things like that. So like certain cough drops or balms that you put on your chest, like Vicks Vapor Rub and stuff, are expectorants. So your fixed oil, this falls less into the herbal medicine and more into nutrition, I would say. But a lot of these oils we use as carriers for things. Castor oil is unique that it's not used as in nutrition. It's used only in herbal medicine, both topically and internally. You will get no nutritive value out of it because it's a very strong cathartic. It makes you, stimulates your bowels. So we'll come back to that another time. So we talked about the essential oils. We talked about essential oils. Now waxes are kind of interesting. They're kind of like an oil, but they're not because they're a wax. And the reason why is that their chemical structure is slightly different. Now, they're fatty per se, meaning they're lipid. They're not water soluble at all. But what they are basically made from is some type of fatty acid, like you might get oleic acid from olive oil. And instead of being attached to a glycerol backbone, it's attached to a fatty alcohol. And these might be, just to jump ahead, so these are different types of fatty acids at the top there. At the bottom, a fatty alcohol. So normally alcohol, ethanol, for example, will have an OH group attached to 2 carbons. And in this case, we have, I don't know how many, that looks like a whole bunch of carbons on there with the OH attached to it. So instead of having a glycerol backbone where you have 3 carbons with 3 OHs, this only has lots of carbons and only 1 OH to get that effect. The importance of this is when you have like, oops, let me go back. When you have these triglycerides, we can digest these and use it as a fuel source. Waxes, on the other hand, are undigestible. So if you consume a whole bunch of wax, it will pass through your intestinal tract pretty much unaffected, okay? So for a while when people were adding like fat-free like potato chips or things like that, they would add wax to it, some type of wax to it that was undigestible, and so it wouldn't have any calories to it. So it gives it a fatty like texture and taste to it without the calories. But sometimes these waxes will cause, like you look at the warnings on these, it causes like anal leakage, you know, fat, which doesn't sound very nice, because you don't absorb it. So it can act as like a stool softener. So mineral oils, I believe, are a type of wax that can be used for constipation. And so in herbal medicine, they don't really have a direct medicinal property. Often waxes are used more for thickening up, they're usually added to oils to thicken it up so that can be used for cosmetic purposes or for to make balms and topical salves. Okay, so in general, the chemical structure of these things, they're really big compounds, and they tend to be solids or semi-solids at room temperature. Okay, it's that fatty acid and fatty alcohol combination that makes them unique from the other ones that we talked about. Plants would produce this in order to prevent evaporation, so their leaves would contain it or the seeds would contain it to prevent evaporation or from moisture from damaging those structures. Okay, bayberry, which does grow around here, is called wax myrtle. It was once used where the seeds were collected and then heated up to obtain the wax. And when beeswax wasn't available, you could make candles from it and add it to your herbal products. Okay, bayberry had some other properties associated with it, probably not associated with the wax, but through other things. So sheep make wax. Lanolin is that waxy coating that's on top of the wool. So when you buy unprocessed wool, it's kind of sticky. It propels water, and so basically, sheep use lanolin as a rain jacket. Okay, so the wool is both insulating and then protects it from the elements. Humans make earwax to prevent water from getting in the ears and to prevent infections, presumably. And then bees use wax for their hives and to add structure and as a building supply, pretty much. Okay. So latex. Latex is a mixture. The take home here is it contains a mixture, an emulsion of various types of both polar and non-polar substances, and the base is water, so aqueous water. So on the left-hand side, this is like a little opium poppy, and the way that opium is obtained is you basically put a whole bunch of puncture holes in the seed pod, and then you scrape that off, and you let it dry, and then you have pure opium, okay? So that's an example of a latex. Latex rubber comes from certain trees that produce this latex compound. There are herbs that we use. So opium poppy, obviously, that's kind of not really legal, so we don't use that. But there are cousins of the opium, like greater celandine and bloodroot, that when you puncture the leaves or the roots, there's this aqueous extract that contains alkaloids. So opium contains alkaloids that are basically the opioids in there are a type of alkaloids, and these have actually kind of similar structure to the opioids that are found in the opium poppy. They can have some analgesic effects and some other effects as well. And so if you look, greater celandine has alkaloids. It also has some other, probably some phenol compounds in there, some water, all in that aqueous base. And both have some nice yellowy, orange, red colors, which is kind of pretty. Bloodroot, as an aside, this was applied topically to skin cancer, to warts, as a way to burn them off. Chelidonium can be used internally as well as topically for a few different things. So, okay, any questions? So, in summary, we started with the carbohydrates, and then we started kind of overlapping with the resins and gum resins, so they kind of appeared there. And then we went into more of the oils and different types of oils. And now we're going to talk about terpenoids. Now, appreciate terpenoids can fall, some terpenoids are essential oils, some of them are going to be resins, some of them can even presumably fall under the glycoside section. Now, with terpenoids, they are their own unique classified chemicals that are based on how they're made, okay? And the building blocks, the little Lego pieces that make up the terpenoids, are called isoprene units. And an isoprene molecule has 5 carbons attached to it, okay? So the monoterpenoid, which is the smallest of the terpenoids, is made by combining 2 isoprene units, and that gives you your monoterpenoid. So 2 for the mono, 4 for the diterpenoids, 6 for the triterpenoids, and 8 for the tetraterpenoids, okay? Now you can divide the monoterpenoids into other classes. There's, when you have the term monoterpene, technically speaking, a terpene is exclusively carbons and hydrogens. A terpenoid means an oxygen's been added to it. Now, I will use terpene and terpenoid interchangeably. I think a lot of authors do. To be accurate, the monoterpenes, something like menthol is considered a monoterpenoid, while pinene, which is the compound in turpentine, is a monoterpene. They're both essential oils. They both have 10 carbons, but menthol has an oxygen in there as well. There are some other subcategories of monoterpenes, which the iridoids and the secoiridoids are more accurate to call them a class of monoterpenoids because they contain some oxygens and a lactone ring we'll talk about. I mentioned the diterpenes. The triterpenes have some other subcategories to it, so do the tetraterpenoids. And then the sesquiterpenes, the monoterpenoids and terpenes have 2 isoprenes. The sesquiterpenes have 4 isoprenes. Or sorry, the diterpenoids have 4 isoprenes, and the sesquiterpenes falls right in between the 2 and the 4. So it's got 1.5 or 3. Okay, I'll come back to that in a second as well. So the red and the blue is the isoprene units attached to these little guys here. You stick a couple of them together, you lengthen the chain, stick 6 of them together. Here we have the basic building block for, let's say, a triterpenoid, and then it cycles around, and then here you've got like a steroid-like compound. So depending on how many of these things you stick together and how they arrange will give you different categories of the terpenoids and terpenes, okay? So I don't know if that helps or not, but that's a little kind of a flowchart breakdown that I created explaining them. So we'll start with the monoterpenes. So 1 isoprene added to another isoprene gives you something that's got 10 carbons in length. You remove this little thing here, and you got this compound that then cycles around, and then here you have in the end alpha pinene. This is a monoterpene. There's no oxygens on it. There are some double bonds. There's a bridge, little structure to it. But this is basically one of the main compounds in paint thinner turpentine, okay? Now, some herbal teas and stuff will have a little bit of this. Small amounts isn't going to hurt you. You don't want to drink a lot of this, just like you don't want to drink gasoline. Not really a good thing to drink, okay? So monoterpenes in general, I could ask a question on the exam as how many isoprene units are used to make a monoterpene? Or I might say, how many carbons are generally, or how many carbons are monoterpenes are comprised of how many carbons? 15, 20, 10, 40, etc. Okay. Some common monoterpenes or terpenoids that you should know about. Menthol is the main peppermint oil. So it smells like peppermint. It's in peppermint tea. It's in a lot of sport creams and topical preparations. Carvacrol and thymol are the main compounds in oregano and thyme oil. I would say they're both, I'm just going to change the order here. This isn't really super important. But what oregano contains both of those compounds, but predominantly the carvacrol. And thymol, which is in thyme oils, also in oregano oil. So thyme and oregano oil are almost the same, but the essential oils is like one's like 70-30 between the two, and the other one's 30-70 kind of like, okay? Camphor is what's in things like Tiger Balm and other sport creams. Has a very distinctive aromatic smell that I think of when I think of sports creams. Eucalyptol is found in eucalyptus oil, shown at the bottom, and then terpenforol is the main antiseptic essential oil in tea tree. Now, appreciate that when you have an essential oil from peppermint or from eucalyptus trees, it's not going to contain just that one essential oil. There'll be a mixture of it, but there may be one that dominates it, okay? Or, yeah. So in general, these are all going to be essential oils. And so they're going to have that antimicrobial effect from being an antiseptic. They're going to be rubefacient because you apply them topically, they irritate the skin and increase blood supply there and can help with pain management. That's why it's called counter-irritant as well as rubefacient, kind of used interchangeably. Carminative because most of these will increase circulation to the intestinal tract and they also relax smooth muscles, so it can have a antispasmodic effect and a carminative effect. They can also stimulate hot or cold receptors in your skin. That's why when you apply like certain sports cream, they have this cooling effect from the menthol or a warming effect from one of the other essential oils in it. So it can help relieve pain. And often these are used in cough formulas, okay? So the main characteristics, when you have a pure essential oil and you buy it, if you go buy an essential oil and it's colored, it's not pure. There's something coloring it because essential oils, they're too small to absorb and reflect visible light. So they're always going to be colorless. They're always going to be volatile. So if you take an essential oil that you buy and you put it on a piece of paper and then you take a hairdryer to it and you blow with the hairdryer for a few minutes, it should not leave a stain on the paper because it should 100% evaporate off. If it leaves a stain, chances are they took the essential oil and they adulterated it with some kind of carrier oil, like a little bit of olive oil or a little bit of almond oil or something else, because almond oil is way cheaper than most of the essential oils, okay? And then the final thing is that they're non-polar. Because they generally have almost or very, very little oxygens, if any, they don't dissolve well in water. So if you have a cup of peppermint tea, they're not actually dissolving in the water itself. You may have little essential oil bubbles kind of diffusing throughout the liquid, but eventually they're all going to settle on the top and form like biphasic, meaning water at the bottom and the essential oils at the top. And so you still get them in your tea, but eventually they'll separate there, okay? So here's thyme on the left, thymol and carbochol are in that, menthol, so that's peppermint there. And here's what camphor laurel, which is actually a cousin of cinnamon tree, produces this guy here, okay? So a lot of the similar overlapping actions with them. So a subcategory of monoterpenes are a type of monoterpenoid that contain oxygens, and these are called iridoids and secoiridoids. So an iridoid and a secoiridoid has what's called a monoterpene lactone. Oops. So I've highlighted here in green, that's a lactone group. It's basically like ketone with the little ester bond like thing here. That's what lactone is there. In general, when you hear of any kind of lactone, when you're talking about phytochemicals, they're very bitter, okay? So monoterpene lactones are either going to be that iridoid or secoiridoids. You can also get diterpene lactones. You could get sesquiterpene lactones, and these are all very, very bitter to taste. So in addition to tasting bitter, in herbal medicine, a bitter taste is often associated with a bitter action, and digestive bitters stimulate digestive function, okay? Now, it's possible to have a bitter compound that doesn't stimulate digestion, but if its herbal action is a bitter, then it basically will stimulate digestion. Many of these monoterpene lactones also have anti-inflammatory effects and can help with tissue healing. So vulnerate, what that means is a substance that helps tissues heal and regenerate, okay? So a few common examples of these are amarogentin, which is in yellow gentian, oleorupen, which is in olive oil, and it's one of the compounds that gives olive oil that bitter, kind of an acrid taste to it, which isn't desirable from a culinary standpoint, but it is really good for you. So some of the best tasting olive oils aren't necessarily going to be as good for you as some of the ones that are more bitter tasting, because that bitter compound helps promote digestion, has anti-inflammatory effects, Often there's other things attached like an antioxidant effect. And then other ones, aucumin and plantain. A few different species. Sorry, I kind of left it hanging there. So harpaglycide, this isn't a herb called devil's claw. It comes from South Africa. It's used as an anti-inflammatory in that country. So you'll see that sometimes in herbal formulas for arthritis. Here you can see it's a glycoside. There's a sugar attached to the iridoid compound. There's also like this little phenylpropanoid derivative. You haven't learned about those yet, attached to it as well. So it's kind of sometimes they'll have multiple things attached to these compounds. And then aucumin, it's found in a lot of herbs, including various plantain species. This has some antiviral, anti-inflammatory, helps with wound healing. There's a sugar attached to it to make it a little more water soluble as well. So, So these are iridoids, and this is the basic backbone for the iridoids. You got a little 5-membered carbon ring, and then the iridoid bridge is over here. With the secoiridoids, there's no cyclical hydrocarbon ring structure to it. You actually have 2 open rings, and this is where the secoiridoid bridges over it. So you can see here, this amarogentin is a very, very bitter compound. So when you use the herb gentian, all you need is a few drops, and you can taste how bitter it is, and it makes people scowl. This is presumably the main bitter compound in it here. And they've gone and added another phenol compound and a sugar onto it as well to make it a little bit more water soluble. And then the oleoropin in olive oil, you can see its structure is right in here. And it's got some other little tyrosol compound and a sugar added onto it. And there's different forms of this. So this one wouldn't be as water soluble, or wouldn't be as prevalent in the oil. If you cleave that sugar off, it's going to be a little bit easier to dissolve in the oil, but olive leaf would definitely have that in it. So the main take home for the monoterpenoid iridoids and the secoiridoids and the iridoids is that they're bitter tasting, and because they've got the oxygen attached onto it, and they often will have other things, they're less likely to be volatile. So menthol is volatile, but when you get into these compounds, because they've got other things attached onto it and more oxygens, they're going to tend to dissolve in water and not want to be pulled out of it as easily as something like menthol would, okay? Because menthol's only got one oxygen that's going to interact with water, okay? So sesquiterpenes, these compounds are between the mono and the diterpenes, okay? So sesqua in whatever language means 1.5, okay? So you're going to get 3 isoprene units, which means 15 carbons. So I might ask a question, how many carbons does a sesquiterpene generally have? Or how many isoprene units does an isoprene have? That would be a question I'd ask, okay? Because these are part of the essential oil, these are going to be volatile. They're going to have some carminative effect. I'm sure they probably would have some antiseptic effects as well. I didn't mention that here, but I'm sure they would. Some of these guys are known to have anti-inflammatory effects. So a lot of the same potential properties that you'd see with the monoterpenes. They're not really that different, just a little bit bigger. Humulene is one of the compounds in hops. Caryophyllene is also in a few other things, including clove. Zingiberine is in ginger. And so I think it's caryophyllene, which is one of the volatile components of marijuana, that when drug dogs are sniffing for marijuana, it's not actually the THC that they're picking up on as much as it is this compound here, this aromatic compound here, apparently. So what's interesting is this compound is also in things like hops and cloves, so you could get a false positive reading, so to speak, if you were transporting a big bag of beer hops in your suitcase. It might actually set the border dogs off. So just something to be aware of. Okay, so ginger has other compounds in it, like gingerol, but there's an essential oil component that contains this thing, and it has other properties. So when you have a whole herb, there could be essential oils and phenolics and terpenoids, triterpenoids, various things working in synergy, okay? So hard to make any major similarities between these. They're just essential oils.
Now the sesquiterpene lactones, there's some really neat compounds in here. So again, you've got 15 carbons because it's made from 3 isoprenes, but they also have that lactone group in it. And most of the sesquiterpene lactones, when I think of these, are really important for a couple of reasons. One, they all taste bitter. So wormwood, Chinese worm that we've talked about, the bitter components in chamomile are related to these. There are some other ones, like when you have lettuce, like even iceberg lettuce will have a bit of a bitter quality to it. You'll get that more with romaine lettuce and stuff. And also things like chicory and endive, they have these sesquiterpene lactones in them. Dandelion root or leaves will have these bitter components in it. So in general, what I would say is they taste bitter, so they're used to promote digestion. That's the first thing. Second thing is a lot of these compounds have antimicrobial effects. So wormwood has activity against various types of worms and other parasites. We also know that Chinese wormwood is the anti-parasitic drug that contains artemisinin, right? Another important compound is matricin, which is in chamomile, and it has really useful anti-inflammatory components and vulnerary components used to help with stomach ulcers and healing of wounds topically. So lots of different things. So when I think of sesquiterpene lactones, I think bitters. Many of them are important antimicrobials against various parasites or bacteria and viruses. Many of these help to decrease inflammation. Wormwood, they've done studies showing that it actually can help keep Crohn's in remission, which is a type of inflammatory bowel disease. Herbs like chamomile help heal stomach ulcers, so they have a vulnerary action associated with it. And often when things have anti-inflammatory effects, they have an associated anti-cancer property as well. So some of these can be used for against cancer through different mechanisms. So another thing is most of the members in the aster family, so the Asteraceae family, has these classic daisy-like flowers. So you've got the center with the petals go around it. These are all in the aster family. That perfect kind of like flower-like structure, like that looks like this is what I think of. They all have these sesquiterpene lactones. So chamomile, feverfew is used for migraines and also has some antiparasitic properties. Chicory, that lactucin compound is also found in various types of lettuce, and it has a bitter compound. Most of these contain, or some of these contain a latex. So when you break a piece of romaine lettuce leaf and you see a little white milky substance, that's going to be the latex that contains these sesquiterpene lactones in it. Okay, and it's good for digestion and promoting. These are used for gallstones to promote bile flow and a number of other things. There you go. So those are the sesquiterpene lactones. Good for antimicrobials, good for bitters, wound healing, a few other things. Diterpenes are a little bit hard to make a generalization for. Monos have 2 isoprenes, the diterpenes have 4 isoprenes. So you're looking at 4 times 5 carbons equals 20 carbons, okay? They're getting heavier. So these things are going to have a higher boiling point than the mono and the sesquiterpenes will. I still think they are going to evaporate to some degree, but not as much as those other compounds. And they're probably not going to have as many odors associated with them compared to the other ones. That's what I'm guessing. I can't say for certain. I can't give you any real general actions associated with them, but some of these have some interesting neurological effects, okay? Here's marijuana, a picture of that on the left-hand side. And the compound, main active compound in that is the tetrahydrocannabinol, okay? So that's what THC is. That's what gives you one of the, there's lots of different compounds, but that's one of the compounds that has a psychotropic effect. Now, in addition to that, you've got steviol. Now, steviol doesn't have any psychotropic effect, but it tastes very sweet. So it's a natural, quote-unquote, artificial sweetener, okay, or quote-unquote natural artificial sweetener. Another interesting compound is Salvinorum A. Now, this compound is in a herb called Salvia divinorum, or diviner sage. And This is a very, very potent hallucinogen that is not regulated by the government. It probably should be. You can purchase it, or used to be able to purchase it, just like certain types of marijuana stores or hemp stores and places like that. And this plant was originally used by a certain group of indigenous people in Mexico, by the shamans there. Unlike ayahuasca, magic mushrooms, LSD that binds to serotonin receptors, it actually binds to a subclass of opioid receptors that is void of an analgesic effect. So unlike opium that makes you feel euphoric and relieves pain, this doesn't do that. There's another group of opioid receptors that actually induces hallucinations, but doesn't make you feel good. And that's why people who are taking a lot of pain medication could start having, like, acting funny and seem a little bit psychotic or hallucinating, because it's stimulating those receptors. And so when people have taken this, go on YouTube and look at people taking salvia norm. Most people do it like, yeah, I don't ever want to do that again. It's not a very enjoyable thing. Some people don't find it enjoyable. I had one of my patients came in who somebody gave him some for his birthday, who they bought at some local hemp store or whatever it was, and he smoked it every day for like a week. And when you take it, one of the effects that it has is it makes you smoke it, but the effects only last for about under 5 minutes. But the person who's taken it gets very confused because they go into like some other dimension in their brain, and they feel like they've been living a life there. And then the way they get very confused because they feel very disjointed. And there's this similar experience that people describe of being in another dimension, having a life there. So this patient that did it every day for a week ended up having a psychotic episode and ended up in the hospital and was there for a few months dealing with his mental health after that. So I really don't think people should be messing around with this. I appreciate when shamans were using this in Mexico, they would be chewing it. Just like if you chew coca leaf in Colombia, you're not going to be dealing with the same thing as if you smoke crack. You know, smoking crack is totally different than chewing coca leaf. One is perhaps healthy for you, has some gentle, mild effects that doesn't pose the same risk as when you're concentrating and smoking it to get that really high spike of the substance, okay? But anyways, the point is that this binds to opioid receptors but doesn't have that analgesic effect. THC binds to cannabinoid receptors. Stevia binds to some receptors in your tongue for taste. This compound, the phytocin A, is in a herb called Vitex. There may be a couple components in Vitex that has some dopaminergic effects. I don't know if this is the compound or not, but it may modulate some dopamine receptors in the body as well. The take home for the diterpenoids, if you remember marijuana and stevia are contained diterpenoids, I'd be happy. Beyond that, I don't think there's a lot I can ask, except for maybe the whole 4 isoprene, 20 carbon sort of thing about it. So triterpenoids, these group of compounds are particularly interesting. You've got your 6 isoprenes, 30 carbons. Most of these form ring structures. And you can have a 5 or a 6-membered ring. And most of these rings are 6-membered, or they could have a 5-membered ring. So 6, here you've got 5 6-membered rings. Here you've got 4 5-membered rings, 4 6-membered rings. Here you have 3 6-membered rings and 1 5-membered ring. This is what steroid compounds, they have this backbone. And so what's neat about these triterpenoids is these are plant steroids, and they can interact with our steroid hormones to have some modulating effects. Kind of like how soy can modulate estrogen receptors, these can modulate our steroid receptors, okay? So triterpenes in general, triterpenoids will have the 30 carbons, 6-membered ring. One compound I think is worth knowing about is ursolic acid. This is getting more and more popular. So you've eaten this before. It's found in apples, some berries, rosemary, various herbs and fruit. This has some important anti-cancer properties, antiviral, anti-inflammatory, may have some cardioprotective effects. I've never seen it sold alone as a supplement. And I think that when you're taking certain herbal products, there could be a dozen compounds having some sort of effect. This is not a steroid compound though, because it doesn't have that 5-membered ring, but it is a triterpenoid. These are not going to be volatile, so you will never find these in essential oils because they're too big to obtain with steam distillation, okay? They're also not going to be very water soluble in this state. You can always add sugar to these compounds and make them glycosides. They'll be more soluble in water, but this currently isn't. If you add sugars to them, then you get the triterpenoid glycosides. Another term for triterpenoid glycosides are called saponins or soaps, okay? So a saponin, what that means is you've got a very large fat soluble or non-polar side and a very large polar side. So you've got a kind of a fatty-like side and a aqueous water-soluble side. And that's what soap is, both polar and non-polar sides to it. And so licorice contains triterpenoid glycosides. In particular, it's called glycyrrhizin. This is an important compound. It has antiviral, anti-inflammatory properties, anti-cancer. And when you add licorice roots to water and you shake it up, it foams up and makes soap, okay? Now, as an aside, a neat little thing is that in Chinese medicine, licorice is probably found in a lot of the formulas used in TCM in Chinese medicine. And in Chinese medicine, they refer it as a herb that helps the other herbs in the formula enter the meridian. So it's kind of, in addition to it having its own unique medicinal properties, it also can help the other herbs get into the meridians and exert their effect in the body. And what I think is kind of neat is with Chinese herb and herbal medicine is they don't use alcohol extracts to dissolve the herbs. They use exclusively decoctions, meaning hot water extracts. They boil up a big bag of herbs and they drink it that way rather than using oils and tinctures and alcohol and stuff. And I suspect that maybe glycyrrhizin, because it's a saponin, maybe it helps act as a soap to dissolve some of the fat-soluble components that are in some herbs that wouldn't normally be dissolving in the water, and helps to do the extraction. So maybe that's one reason why licorice is often added to a lot of different herbal preparations and formulas. So going back to your glycosides, so glycyrrhizin is a glycoside. The aglycone, meaning the part that doesn't contain sugar, is called glycyrrhetinic acid, and the glycone component of it is the glucuronic acid. These are those sugar molecules used to make it more water soluble, which is kind of cool. You would not need to identify, someone's asking, do we need to identify any of the structures? No, you don't need to identify the structures if you saw them on paper, but you need to know it's got how many isoprene units, whether the sugar is attached and stuff like that. But I don't go into a lot of detail, but the general stuff you do. Another property that's kind of unique with licorice is used as an adrenal tonic. So when people are chronically burnt out and they kind of crash and their cortisol levels are really, really low, you can give licorice and it helps to boost up cortisol levels. And so if someone's acutely stressed out and their cortisol levels are too high, I wouldn't necessarily want to give them licorice then, but if they've burnt out because they've got chronic fatigue syndrome or they've got just adrenal fatigue, then I would consider using licorice in a higher amount. I mean, small amounts I'm not worried about. The high amounts of licorice will raise cortisol. The way that it works is it inhibits an enzyme that basically is used to convert cortisol to the less active form, cortisone, okay? Now, one of the things, though, when you do that is cortisol, it does have some aldosterone-like properties, meaning that it causes you to retain water. So people that eat a lot of licorice candies, let's say, that's made from pure licorice, can actually develop high blood pressure. It induces something called pseudoaldosteronism. So licorice is fine to take short-term in high amounts or long-term in small amounts, but if you have a heart condition, elevated blood pressure, things where you don't want to upset the balance of sodium and potassium in your system, you wouldn't want to take a licorice, or you wouldn't want to monitor your patients, okay? So someone's saying, confirming that saponins might help dissolve fat-soluble components. I think that's what they would do. Saponins are both water-soluble and fat-soluble, like soap is, okay? Now, steroidal saponins. So the difference between a steroidal saponin and the glycyrrhizin that we talked about in licorice is they're both triterpenoids. They're both saponins, but steroidal saponins, the A-glycone portion of it is a steroid-like compound because it has those three-membered, those six-membered rings, three of those, and a five-membered ring stuck onto it. And that's this pink compound here mimics estrogen, testosterone, cortisone, cortisol, a few other things, okay? So these two can dissolve in water. So although the A-glycone, the triterpenoid is not water soluble, they will have sugars attached to it. And when you've heard about herbs like astragalus as an immunostimulant, it contains astragalosides. It contains these steroid-like compounds that have sugars attached to them. And these sugars mean that you can make a tea or a decoction with it, and it'll dissolve in it. Ginseng contains ginsenosides. Eleutherococcus, which is Siberian ginseng, contains eleutherosides. So anything that are often, many things that end in sides are usually glycosides for these corresponding herbs, okay? So when you look at the structure of testosterone, aldosterone, cortisol, and cholesterol, they all share a similar type of structure. And appreciate most herbs that are rich in these steroidal saponins are often considered adaptogens. They help the body cope to stress, because when you're stressed out, cortisol goes up, and then sometimes your sex hormones are affected or aldosterone's affected. And so they have a modulating effect. So anything that has a steroid-like compound, it's no surprise that it's going to potentially have an anti-inflammatory effect like cortisol does. It'll help the body cope to stress. Potentially can lower cholesterol, because if you look at the structure of cholesterol, it's similar to these steroid compounds. Because it can modulate steroid hormones like testosterone, it's going to have an aphrodisiac effect or increased libido. So Korean ginseng can increase sperm count and increase libido. Most of these will also have some effect on the heart and act as a gentle heart tonic. And then a lot of these guys will modulate the immune system, can increase, if it's too high, kind of bring it down. If it's too low, bring it up, because it's modulating some of these cortisol receptors. So adaptogenic herbs have anti-cancer effects. They have, they're good for the heart, they're good for immune, they're good for reproduction. They do everything. I take an adaptogen every day because I'm generally sleep deprived with my kids. Helps boost my energy, keeps my libido good because I'm an old 45-year-old guy with two kids. You know, sometimes we need a little help with that. Not too much help, just a little bit sometimes if you're not sleeping well for like a week. And then it can, in general, help just prevent all sorts of bad things. The other thing, cool thing with adaptogens is they may help promote longevity. And so research shows herbs like Reishi mushroom, which is the mushroom of immortality, it also contains these steroidal saponins in addition to the glucans that we talked about earlier on. And so it may be that there's some research showing that adaptogenic herbs help to prevent the shortening of telomeres when animals are under stress or cells are under stress. And this may be one of the ways that it helps. Because if you've ever seen people that are acutely stressed, they can age very quickly. So here's ginseng on the left, here's our ginsenoside, and here's astragalus or Siberian ginseng on the right, and one of its compounds. Now I just want to go and finish a couple more slides. If you gotta go, please leave, and you can watch the recording. I just want to finish the next slides, a couple slides. It'll take me 5 minutes to do it, okay? The last thing is cardiac glycosides. These are a type of steroidal saponins, which are a type of triterpenoid saponins, that specifically target the heart and increase the force of contraction, which is a positive ionotropic, and slow down the rate at which the heart is beating, which is negative chronotropic. Inotropic refers to the calcium ions that are going the influx, so it increases the ions, calcium ions going in, and slows the heart down. Chrono means time. So many of the adaptogens are sometimes used for things like edema, swelling in the ankle. And foxglove is used for congestive heart failure, but herbs like astragalus and even some of the ginsengs might have that cardiotonic effect that's very mild and acts kind of as a gentle cardiac glycoside. Foxglove is not an adaptogen. You can't take that. It's very dangerous. It's a very powerful drug if you take too much of it, compared to ginseng and astragalus, where there's minimal side effects if you were to take those. The last group I want to talk about are the tetraterpenoids. So these are 40 carbon or 8 isoprene units. These guys are very fat soluble, and most of them are colored. And the reason why they're colored is that most of these exist in a form where they have conjugated double bonds. Conjugated double bonds, I'm going to skip ahead, is where you have double bond, skip place, double bond, skip, double bond. When you have all these conjugated double bonds, what happens is they are able, through the bonds, to absorb and reflect visible light. So the lutein, which is an example, reflects yellowy orange light. Lycopene, and lutein's in a whole bunch of different things, including kale and leafy green vegetables and spinach. Lycopene is red, and that's the main compound in tomato. And so one of the properties that they have is that they are colored pigments. They're great antioxidants. Some of them have anti-inflammatory effects. Some of these guys have anti-cancer effects. We know that a carotenoid-rich diet does help protect against cancer. I don't think supplementing with a carotenoid does the same as eating a diet rich in them. They may have some anti-diabetic effects associated with them as well. Again, I would still prefer getting a diet. I don't supplement with carotenoids. I just recommend certain ones in the diet. Provitamin A, so beta-carotene is used to make vitamin A in the body. Vitamin A is toxic if you take too much. Beta-carotene is not going to be toxic, generally speaking, from a diet. And the other thing, certain ones will help with macular degeneration, will deposit in the eye in a certain area and help protect it from damage from UV light and oxidative stress. Now, there are two main classes. There are the carotenes, which are the tetraterpenes, meaning they have no oxygens. And then there's the xanthophylls, which are the tetraterpenoids. They have the oxygens, okay? The main difference is lutein, and that's going to be, again, the xanthophylls. These little OH groups means that it's going to traverse the cell membrane and have the oxygens at the surface, while the things like lycopene, these are only fat soluble, and it'll sort of stay inside the cell membranes more and help protect the arteries where there's a lot of cholesterol buildup from oxidizing and have some other properties, okay? So beta-carotene and lycopene are two examples of carotenes. They give the red and orange color, help prevent cancer, heart disease, lots of good properties with these guys, okay? Lycopenes, tomato products are associated with, in particular with prostate cancer, probably exert some positive effects on other types of cancers, including skin and breast as well, okay? The xanthophylls contain the oxygen, so lutein, which is in kale, and then there's other ones like capsanthin, which is found in red peppers. These are yellow and red pigments, found in lots of different things. Another one's important, which is not really a plant, but astaxanthin is found in salmon and shrimp because of that red color. In addition to the fish oils that are in salmon, this astaxanthin that's in wild salmon, generally not in farm salmon unless they supplement it because they only feed it like corn and they don't actually eat the krill and the other things that bioaccumulate it. Astaxanthin has been shown to have lots of other properties as well. So I'm not going into all the detail, but these are pretty magical compounds. So carotenoids are great. Another fun one is achiote. You'll never use this in practice probably, but this is what, if you go down the Amazon, this is the traditional face paint that they'll use, but it's also been used in cosmetics. It's sometimes referred to as lipstick tree because they've used it as a natural pigment for lipsticks. Baby Bell, the cheese, the waxy coating is nice and bright red, and they use this as the coloring for that, or at least they used to. You can eat it. It's used in some Latin American recipes and stuff. probably has some anti-cancer properties to it, and antioxidant properties. So here's a list of things that carotenoids are good for. So for your eyes, lutein and zeaxanthin are good for macular degeneration, light sensitivity, cataracts. For heart disease, most carotenoids have a positive effect on blood pressure, plaque buildup, and preventing strokes. They also deposit in your skin, changing the color of your skin. So if you drink a lot of carrot juice, your skin will go orange. But if you have mixed carotenoids, it'll give you a bit of an SPF of 2 or 3, meaning you're less likely to get sunburn after 15 minutes being in the sun if you take it. It's not huge, but it's still significant. And it can also make it look more attractive. There was a study that was done where they took one person and in Photoshop they tweaked the hue of their skin color so they looked like whether they had a carotenoid-rich diet or what they'd look like if they had a tan. And then they got people to basically rate attractiveness based on pale skin, carotenoid skin, or tan skin. And in general, what people found was that they chose the most attractive of the photos was the one that had the skin tone of someone that was eating a plant-based diet. And if you appreciate eating more plants means you're going to live longer, you're going to have healthier offspring, and so it's sexy to eat vegetables apparently. So, and then finally, also different types of cancers and diabetes are all associated with a carotenoid-rich diet. And I don't think carotenoids are the only thing in there. I usually don't recommend them, like I'll say that again. But drinking tomato juice, eating carrots, taking kale, all that stuff is good for you. Taking beta-carotene in high dose, not the same thing. Okay. I'm sorry that I went over. I just wanted to have finished in that whole section. Do you guys have any questions? I'm going to go through the questions quick. If you guys got to go, you got to go, and I'll post this. Someone asked me, please repeat what a vulnerary is. A vulnerary basically is a substance that helps with wound healing. So you take it topically for cuts and burns and ulcers, or internally for things like stomach ulcers. Do we need to know the structure of the exam? I think I answered that. No, but the text component you need to know that anything I've written in text, yes, but the pictures, no. Yes. In general, I think some of these saponins, this is my opinion. I think no one's ever done any testing, or I've never seen any test on it, but I suspect that licorice and other saponins may help other non-polar compounds dissolve. Can you clarify where xanthophylls and carotenes reside within the body, if you mentioned that? They will, in general, because they dissolve in fat, when you eat them in your diet, they're going to go into things like olive oil, the fat component of your meals, and then they'll get pulled into your chylomicrons and your bile, and probably, I'm assuming, will circulate with your cholesterol in the body. You'll find them, they'll go anywhere where there's basically fatty constituents. So in your cell membranes, they're likely to kind of go in between the cell membranes and have some effect on the cells there. They'll probably go in circulating cholesterol in your body and have it exert their effects there. There's, they have affinity. Some have a greater affinity for the eyes. I mean, I think they go everywhere, but some will deposit in the eyes. Some of them probably deposit in different places in breast and prostate tissue, in skin, so all over the place. Okay, so there we go. Next week we'll do the phenolics. Do you guys have any other questions before I close? How was, apart from the little issues with sound that kind of slowed me down a little bit, how's the lectures? You guys happy with them so far? If you have any feedback you want to give me, please do. I'll post some sample questions for the phenolics this week as well. I think that's about it. You guys are good? Okay. You guys have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next Monday. And if you have any questions, email me or post it on that forum there, okay? Thanks. Bye for now.